Welcome, everybody, to the Bassfug Podcast. I'm sure, Sean, you've heard this a couple of times. We are here with Sean Naughton, a.k.a. Spiderhound, all the way from New Jersey. Welcome to the program, Sean. Thank you so much for your time. I totally appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me. Well, I was flattered to be asked.
And I'm sorry. I see that it might have been jarring from my pre-interview voice to my interview voice now.
Not at all.
Okay. So there's a lot of things I wanted to talk to you about. I guess the first thing that I'll ask is I noticed that your styles are, I don't want to say all over the place, but you have a lot of different styles. You've gone from a reggaeton, there's one of your singles, High Grade, to even your latest single, which is more, dare I say, kind of pop. I'm curious, how do you shape your artistic landscape, your sound? Is it because you're trying to sort of seem relevant or chase trends, or is it because you're trying to try new things out and you're trying to explore areas that you haven't really tried out before?
Oh, great question. So I've been doing music for quite some time. I mean, ever since I was 14 years old, and music has been my passion since I can remember. Ever since I was a child, music was my hobby. Picked up the guitar at age 14. Classic rock was my first love. I would come home from high school and then just listen to records and figure out guitar lines lick by lick, by ear. And, that grew into me mastering the guitar, and then getting into first cover bands. And then original bands when I got sick of doing the cover band thing, and just my love for music and always seeking out the next new sound, and sounds that intrigued me and stuff like that. So I've been all over the place in terms of influences, from everything from classic rock to heavy metal to jazz to classical music to all sorts of electronic music. And as a producer, when I open the DAW and I get into the DAW, I go in with zero expectations. So there's no preconceived notions. So I'm completely open to whatever happens and whatever that may be. So if I go in and it's like, it looks like the thing that I'm working on is a hip hop tune, it's like, oh, I guess I'm doing hip hop today. If the thing I'm working on is a reggaeton, I guess I'm doing that today, because I've learned the hard way that when you try to force like a square peg into a round hole and make something that it's not, the song never turns out good. So I just follow the muse wherever it goes. And because I love all types of music, I love to produce all types of music. And the short answer to your question, Will, would be, if I had to produce in one subgenre my whole life, that would be the ultimate nightmare for me.
Yeah. I just kind of want to touch on some things you said. You were talking about in the early stages, you were figuring out guitar. Can you remember your first music memory? Like, I presume it was as a child. Do you remember what you were influenced by when you just sort of were learning to perceive our reality, I guess? Was it like, I don't know. I know for me, I remember some of the first songs I remember are like Huey Lewis and the News on the radio, and I'm curious that I'm not a psychoanalyst or anything, but I'm just curious what it was in the early childhood music memory bank vault, I guess, let's say, that sort of may be lurking somewhere now with your exploration with different types of genres.
Yeah, I was born in the 70s, right? So the first songs that were swimming around my head were 70s songs. Those are like whatever pop music was on the radio at the time in the 70s in the 70s. So, like a song that comes to mind is like the night the lights went out in Georgia. Like I remember, and everything from like Elvis to the Beatles to, like all that type of stuff was like, and pop, whatever the pop songs were at the time. So disco, I remember disco and all that stuff. So and it really was all over the place because my parents are from Ireland. They were born and grew up in Ireland, and so Irish music as well. So it was it was like it's like Irish music and pop music of the time are like my first memories.
Do you find when sometimes I interview people and we talk about sort of the single versus the album, and listening to your music, you have a lot of singles. You have some EPs like in the background. We have your dopamine EP picture. People aren't going to hear it. Sorry. Maybe we can make it the thumbnail. I don't know. But I'm curious because you're talking about Elvis, you're talking about the Beatles, and I think people think that it's always been about the album, but I think people forget that it was actually the single first. Music distribution was mostly about the single. The album was sort of a new phenomenon, and now we've kind of gone back to the single. I'm curious how you kind of feel about that. If you think that statement is true, and second, if you sort of see music kind of going back to its roots.
So you were talking about early music memories just before, and a really good early music memory for me just popped into my head, and it was the first single that I bought as a child. And I remember, so like I got on my bicycle, I rode, so like way down to the end of the block, there was a record store actually at the end of the block in like the shopping center, right? And I went in and I had my allowance money, and I think it was like $3 or something like that. And I bought Another Brick in the Wall Part 2 by Pink Floyd.
Oh, wow.
And on the other side was Careful with That Axe, Eugene. Careful with That Axe, Eugene. And that was the first single, Wax, because we had a record player at the time, right? We had like an 8-track and a record player, a unit. So I'm totally dating myself, but that was the first single.
8 tracks sound great, by the way. I don't know if y'all out there know that, but they have a nice compression on them. If you listen to David Bowie on 8-track, it's the best David Bowie experience you're going to get. Sorry, continue.
Oh yeah, no, I think we didn't have that much cool. It was like 70s stuff, and like I remember we had some Christmas music on 8-track and stuff like that. But yeah, so Another Brick in the Wall Part 2 was a single record that I bought. I remember buying It Ain't Rock and Roll to Me by Billy Joel with my, because I was a paper boy, and like I remember like spending my money. That's how I would earn the money. I wouldn't blow it all on me, but like, a good portion of it, I would, go to the record store, buy singles. And if I could afford it, I'd buy a full record, like a full album. But at that time, the album was a real experience, and basically, and it's all we had, right? So you would have the record, and there would be some awesome art on the record, and the lyrics would be inside. All the lyrics would be printed out on the cover, and I would just lie there on the ground and let the record play and like read the lyrics and have like the story go through my mind and try to figure out like, oh, what's this song about? Like, because some songs were more esoteric than others. Some songs, it's clear, it's cut and dry what the song's about. But I remember like I would like, make like a movie in my mind about like what the song was about. And I would imagine the artists creating the music and all that. So it was a full thing in my head. And this was before MTV came out. Mm. And then when MTV came out, they actually, that was like, it blew everybody's minds, because it was like, now there actually was like videos that you could watch to the songs. And, I would watch that stuff like all the time, even though like when it first came out, they would have about like a dozen videos, and they would just show them on a loop, like over and over, like 24 hours a day, be the same 12 songs, like over and over again.
Do you think that sort of took something away? Because I'm not sure if we could. Well, I don't know. I was about to say something I don't agree with that. I was about to say, I'm not sure if we could go back to that consumption of music, but I find myself, especially when I'm listening to artists for the show, there's a couple of directions I want to go. I'll just get out my little anecdote here. I decided a couple of years ago, you know what? I'm tired of these Bluetooth speakers. I'm going to find an old stereo system. I'm going to get an amp. I'm going to do the whole shebang. I'm going to find some CD player with a USB key drive that I could plug in, line in my Spotify. And now I find myself sitting down again, listening to full albums. For a while, for the past decade, it was like, oh, I'm programming or whatever. I'm at work or I'm shopping or whatever. And it's sort of a background thing, which is still fine. But to really kind of sit there and sort of soak in an album is something I don't want to speak for other people, but it just kind of seems like, I don't know if people are doing that. You're talking about when you're getting these records. Like I remember, what was it? Targus by Emerson, Lake and Palmer. You look at the cover and it's this weird aardvark thing, and it looks like they were all on acid when they drew it. And you're listening to it and you're like, what is any of this about? It's like a Dungeons and Dragons game gone wrong, you know. But I'm wondering if you notice that in sort of new music, if it's too explicit, you know, is everything too hit you over the head? Too explicit the message, or is there room for some type of interpretation anymore?
Yeah, there totally is a room for interpretation, but I think the difference between when I was a kid listening to music and now is that we had more patience back then. Life was on a very slower schedule. Like, so for example, like your favorite bands, like they created a new album like every 2 years or something like that, right? So like, and you were okay with that. You were like, oh, I can't wait till the next album comes out, and you wait 2 years to hear the album, and then when it comes out, you're stoked for it, right?
Yeah.
And also movies at the time, like when a movie would come out, like it would be in the movie theater for like a year.
Yeah.
And then it wouldn't come to cable till like, maybe a year or two later, and so on and so forth. Fast forward to today's society where like everything's instantaneous. It's 40,000 songs are released every single day. And in order to stay relevant and compete for people's attention, you have to stay in front of them. So like if you try to do the album model in 2020, it's very challenging, because you would have to have a ton of quantity. You would have to have thousands and thousands of songs because you would release your album and then a week later they'd be like, oh, that was great. What do you got now?
Yeah.
So it's like, that's the difference, is that like there's no patience these days. Like everything's on fast forward. Like, so like when I was a child, everything was in slow motion, and we were okay with it, and we didn't have any expectations of anything being different, right? So that was normal to us, so that we could kind of lie down on the floor and absorb an album for a year, and paint these
friends would come over. Friends would come over, and you'd all listen to the same album.
Totally. Yeah. But nowadays it's like there's so much awesome music out there, and to be honest, like, and I'm both people. Like I was that person back in the 70s, 80s. I was that person, but I'm also today. I'm that person that like, if I put a song on Spotify and it doesn't grab me within 5 seconds, I'm switching it, right? Like, so like, yeah. I've evolved into the person that has no patience for waiting, and like I want instantaneous music and all that stuff. So like I guess I've kind of evolved into the current day zeitgeist.
It's impossible not to. I mean,
right.
we all go that 1 week where we go, hey guys, I just want to say I'm quitting Facebook and blah blah blah. And then 2 weeks later, you're on it again. It's technology is so ubiquitous now that if getting away from it is just almost foolish, it's when I hear you say that, it's for me, it's like, I would think that maybe you would be nostalgic and try to fight it, because I know I was a bit nostalgic and I was trying to fight it. And it's like, no, I don't want to do singles. I just want to put out albums and stuff. But I recognize that's like a faulty way of thinking, Do you find yourself being more nostalgic and sometimes finding yourself in these, like, I guess, I don't want to say ruts, but in these traps of forcing the peg into the square hole, like you were saying?
So no, like I, as I was saying before, like I'm both of those people. Like I am the person that can enjoy an album, and I am that person that has, attention deficit syndrome, right? Like where I'm consuming like crazy amounts of music every day, and week to week I have a new favorite artist and stuff like that. I'm both people, and I can do both,
Yeah.
right? But in terms of an artist strategy in 2021, like to stay relevant and top of mind with people, in my opinion, singles is the way to go. Because basically, and currently the goal that I set for myself is like I release a song every month. So that's a minimum of 12 songs per year. But in 2020, I actually released 17 songs. So that's both self-released and label releases as well. And, this is a result of my daily music making practice, right? Because I'm a firm believer that quantity leads to quality, right? So, and I'm also a firm believer in the Pareto Principle, which is like the 80-20 rule, meaning like 80% of the songs that I work on are mediocre, and 20% of the songs that I work on are release worthy. So given that fact, I want my 20% to be 20% of a bigger number, right? Like I don't, you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, totally. I get it. On that, maybe we could pivot a little bit to talking about singles, but how to promote them. For someone who's listening to this, who's a new artist, who has Ableton installed on their laptop and is ready to go, what do you think the best route is? We've interviewed some people where they talk about collectives, like Discord groups. There's a lot of ways to go with this. I'm curious what you would recommend to a new producer for promoting themselves and how to promote the single. Is it just making like a cool video and then posting it a week before your single, or is there more to it?
Well, I think you have to think about growing a community, right? Or being part of communities, right? Because so for example, I'm part of the Producer Dojo community, and which is Ilgate's community, right? So I'm the head of A&R for Ilgate's record label, Producer Dojo. It's also a community of producers from all over the world. And it's an amazing community. And the cool thing about being in a community like that is that we have each other's backs, right? So, and we know each other, and we're friends with each other, and we respect each other. And we're of the mind that, like, if one of us rises, we all rise. So like we all rise together, right? Mm-hmm. So if you get into some dope communities like that, when you put your single out, all you have to do is just, like let your communities know, and they'll be, as long as you're a productive member of that community, right? So you're not the type of person that's always like, when you're posting in social media, it's not always just like, oh, check me out. This is about me. It's like, it's more about give. So like add value to other people. So basically add value to the people like 90% of the time, and then ask them for something in return 10% of the time.
Jab, right hook.
I think where people go.
Gary Vaynerchuk says, yeah.
Yeah, totally. So it's like, and it doesn't have to be stuff that you've created. Like you could just share curated content, be like, hey, check out this dope article, check out this helpful tutorial, check out this concept, this helpful concept. And then 10% of the time, just feel like after you've been helpful for the whole month, it's like, oh, by the way, yeah, I got a single. You check it out if you want, right? And the thing is, you've basically built up so much karma points within your communities. Like when they see you release, like, oh hell yeah, I'll support this release. This is done. I love that guy. He's awesome. So that's one note there, is like join as many communities as you can. But when you join the community, have the frame of mind where like, how can I add value to this community? Not about, because some people go wrong and they'll join a community and then they'll just be like, check my SoundCloud, like, and that doesn't go over well. But like, if you join communities and add value to them, when it's time for your content to come out, they'll be super stoked to share and promote and do anything to help you.
Do you find these communities do you think it's more producers listening to producers now? Do you think there are non-music fans? I'm sure there must be, but I guess I'm just leading this into a bigger question. Because you're saying you get a lot of support from other people in the community, and I presume these are other artists, correct?
Right. So the producer dojo community, like we're all producers in the community. But we also have a Facebook private page. There's about 10,000 people in there, and it's a mix of both. But I would say, the large percentage of them are producers, right?
Yeah, it's. I find now there's music. This is just my opinion. I could be totally wrong. I find music it's not better or worse. It's just different. I find now with YouTube and all the tutorials and everything, I feel like every music fan is probably a musician now, and when you go to a show, before you'd have maybe 5 guys checking the pedal board, trying to get up close or something. But now it's like, if you're a musician, you're under maximum scrutiny and like everybody is, you release an album and you go on YouTube and 5 guys are covering it already. They know how to play all your songs. Do you find that this is kind of a new sort of phenomena where music production has been democratized, which is awesome, by the way? I'm just saying, do you find that more music fans are music producers than there are just standalone music fans?
It seems that way, and then the reason why is because there's no barrier for entry these days, right? So like when I was growing up, there was tons of barriers for entry because it was all like guarded by the record labels, right? So like to really have any kind of say in the industry, like you had to be signed or on a record label because they own the means of distribution, and all that stuff. So, but these days there's no barrier for entry. If you have a laptop, you don't even need to get special software. You could just start making music with a base laptop that you get, right? And you can start producing music, which is absolutely wonderful. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing, because that means more diversity in music. Cooler cutting edge kinds of sounds come up from people just experimenting on their laptops and stuff like that. And I think it's a wonderful thing.
Yeah, you could find the next Skrillex in Brazil or Colombia or something. You don't have to fly to the Sunset Strip and get a cash advance that's eventually going to screw you over in the end, anyways, right? So it's totally
right. It's crazy. Like there's these young people these days, like 16, 17 years old, and they're just like knocking out these bangers, and like they've had no formal training or no music training at all. It's just like they're good with technology and stuff like that, and they get the hang of it, and they make it work.
And this is such a new phenomenon too. Like I remember having a 4-track, in the 90s or whatever from a pawn shop, and then having to use having to use DOS to load whatever the heck I was using to make music, right? And but now it's just so easy access. I think it's only really been the last 15 years. It's kind of beautiful. The thing is, sometimes you hear people complaining. They say, "Oh, there's too much out there and there's a lot of noise." But it's not about whether it's good or not. It's about people being able to express themselves.
Right. Yeah. Agreed. I think it's beautiful that people can enjoy music and also participate in it as well. And the more the merrier. I mean, if you ask me, because like I said before, these days I'm a mad consumer of sounds. Like I have headphones on all day. I'm constantly, half the time I don't even know who I'm listening to. And then if something like really grabs me, I'm like, damn, who is this? And like, with all the Spotify algorithmic playlists and stuff like that, like Spotify knows what what's what sounds I've been into,
Yeah.
and then they'll serve up this awesome algorithmic playlist, and it's like, it's insane. And I find a lot of awesome music, right?
You were talking about, you were listening to the Ben Jordan interview that we did, Flashbulb. Shout out to Ben. Thank you for doing the interview.
Yes.
We were talking about computers and AI. Do you see a world where your $9 Spotify subscription is purely just going to be generating sounds that increase maximum dopamine that's being measured by your smartwatch? Or do you think there's still going to be that sort of that need for humans? Interaction, I guess, or representation in music.
No, I completely agree with Ben's. His name's Ben, right?
Yeah, Ben Jordan. Flashbulb.
Yeah, Ben. I completely agreed with Ben's response, which, if I recall, he said that AI is never going to replace humans, because humans have emotions, and when they make music, they're basically telling stories of their experience in this life, and the pain, the trauma, the laughs, the ups, the downs, the cries, all that stuff. And AI is never going to be able to do that, right? I agreed with him absolutely, completely. To me, like, the music that resonates with me, it's always something that's tugging my emotional strings somehow, and that's a very human skill set, because I've heard a lot of the AI music, and there's something very two-dimensional. There's something very two-dimensional about it.
Yeah, I don't know. Some days I wake up and I agree with that, and then other days I wake up and I look at my phone and I go, I don't know. Maybe it's going to be terminated. I don't know. It ebbs and flows for me. I'm curious why the electronic music production, and why not continuing, I guess, with your earlier influences? What is it about? We haven't talked about the gear yet. I'll ask that after. But what is it about electronic music that sort of took you away from contemporary music? Or are you still doing contemporary music, air quotes, contemporary music?
Yeah, great question. So I was in rock bands for decades, right? And it kind of ran its course. And there's some big downsides to being in a rock band, right? Like, all the damn equipment. Like, whenever we had gigs, I'm lugging in like these heavy amps, yeah, heavy guitars, heavy microphone stands. Yeah. I'm cutting up my hands, like, and then you do this awesome gig, your adrenaline's pumping. Now you got to break everything down, yeah, and now you got to tear it all down and break. It's a pain in the neck, right? Yeah. And in addition, when you're in a band and you have bandmates, like, you depend on them in order to make music, right? So like we had a 24/7 rehearsal studio, but the thing is, if you show up to rehearsal and then the drummer doesn't show up, it's like, oh man, like, yeah, like we can't do the thing tonight,
Yeah, it's like herding cats.
So it's like herding cats, right? And so the thing that absolutely really attracted me to electronic music is that, like, I didn't have to depend on anyone else. Like, if I was good to go, we're good to go. Like, and I could just do it all from the comfort of my home on my laptop. So yeah, and I got the electronic music bug when I lived in England in 1993, and I was there. I attended a bunch of raves while I was there, and it was like life changing. Yeah. And at the time I was a rock and roll musician, but I said, damn, someday I'm gonna have to work on work on making electronic music. So when the rock and roll period of my life ended, it was the perfect time. I was like, oh, now I can focus on electronic music.
Can we talk about you hit the button for me? All right. Can we talk about the 1993 rave scene in London? Can you elaborate on that a bit? And how long were you there for long, or was it just a brief stint? Or and who I guess, just as a fan, by who did you see live?
Oh yeah. Okay. So So in 1993, it was my junior year in university, and I did the year abroad. And I went to the University of East Anglia, and it was amazing. It was a very diverse campus. We had people from all over the world, and it was just all about dance. It was all about electronic music. That's the music that everyone listened to, and everyone was a DJ, wax DJ, right? So there was no, fancy equipment. It was all like wax. And that's what they did. Like they set up these raves on the weekends, or they would go to raves like in these big English fields. Tents would be set up, and sound systems and stuff like that, and then they would just rave for days. So being introduced to that culture and just how inviting everybody was, like everybody was your friend, which was really refreshing for me coming from America, where I was used to a very cliquey kind of a society where everybody was in their own cliques, and it was just a bunch of cliques, right?
It was grunge.
Yeah.
It was as elitist as you could get.
It's just everybody had like walked around in cliques, right?
Yeah.
Whereas like I felt in England, it was just like there were no cliques. It was just like everybody was just keen to get to know other people, and they really loved diversity, and they were open to differences in people instead of afraid of the differences in other people. So and when you go to a rave in that environment, it's dope because like everybody you meet is your friend, and they're super chill, and it just really lent itself to an amazing experience.
I remember the first time we're in Canada, Montreal, but I remember I was in another province, and there was a Chiptune, like a Game Boy music event in 2006 or something. And it was in New York, and I just said, fuck it. Like, I'm taking a bus there. I'm buying the bus ticket. I don't know where I'm going to crash. I'm just going to go. And the point of the story is I went there, and it was this new kind of style. It wasn't really mainstream yet. And everybody was just so welcoming, and it was such a blast. And even though this was almost a decade ago, I still look back at those memories, and I'm just like, holy cow, that was really special. And going back to the 1993 rave stuff, if you go on YouTube and you look at the videos of 1993 raves in London or wherever, you'll see the comment sections of just these super, super ecstatic, like really just the most beautiful comments you'll ever read on YouTube, believe it or not. I really suggest people to go check that out. I feel like a lot of memories were made during that era that you'll never forget.
Absolutely. Yeah. It was a huge part of it. It was an incredible experience that year. And it was really formative for me as well. And a lot of great friends were made there that I carried through for the rest of my life. And yeah, you're absolutely right. It was just one of those things that just stuck with me. And it's interesting too, because like the music was different back then. Like again, this goes to what I was talking about before. People have more patience, because like the songs were longer. Like they'd be like a 12-minute song, right? Like when's the last time you've seen a DJ play a 12-minute song these days? Like doesn't. It's like 1 minute, and then the next song comes in. So, but I think the reason for that is because they're all wax, right? So it's kind of hard to do 2 minutes of this song and 2 minutes of this song, like because you have to dial in the transition.
Well, the people that were doing that
stuff, so
they made careers off that. Like if you were a DJ that was spinning wax and you could switch between records in 40 seconds, like that was the Q-Berts of the world.
Right. Yeah. But so like the raves that I went to was like, they would let it ride. Like, the buildups would be longer. The drops would be longer. The intros would be really long. Like everything was just longer, because I think people had more patience. And these days it's just, again, it's accelerated. Like, so now we have this technology, and you could flip from song to song really easily. Also you have the crowds that don't have the patience. They want the next build up and the next drop and the next build up and the next drop. So but it's interesting. Like, so when I attend like raves now, I get that feeling back again. That I had back in 1993, but it's just the music's different. It's like we've all accelerated and we have less patience as they did back in 1993. They danced to a song for like 12 minutes long, and it'd just be like the same like do 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 like hypnotic beat that they danced to for like 12 minutes, and they'd be happy as clams, you know.
So you find the current rave scene is similar, or do you think it's changed? Because you said I don't know, maybe I misheard, but do you find it similar?
So the vibe, you know, the vibe, like the vibe is the same, right? It's just that whole where everybody's friendly and everybody's having a great time and they talk to strangers and stuff like that. That's all the same. The only thing that's different is that, like, you know, nobody's playing 12-minute songs. Like, there's drop.
Sounds like Megatron and Optimus Prime fighting for 7 hours. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. But the vibe, it's the same vibe. It's like, you know, all those years passed, and I don't know if this is because it's my experience of that it's the same vibe, but to me it's like, oh man, this is like just what I experienced back in 1993 and those days. It's just the music's different and the people are younger, right? But that same vibe that we all felt back then, I feel it at the big concerts. Well, when there were big concerts.
I wanted to talk about that, but before I jump into that, let's tie up a loose end from earlier. We were talking about the communities. How would a new person find the communities to be a part of?
Yeah, so I mean, you know, you could just look on Facebook. You could, so for example, if you look on Facebook and then, you type in bass music community or something like that. And then, once Facebook knows what the hell you're interested in, you're just going to get advertised to. All right. Once they know that, like, you're a bass music fan, you're going to be hit by all the different communities. And then once you get into one community, you're going to learn about another 10 communities and then so on and so forth. So you just have to find one and, make some contacts, have some conversations and stuff like that. And then that will lead to another one, to another one, to another one. And the more communities you join, the more you learn about. And really that's the best way. That's the best way to do it.
Excellent. Okay, let's talk about the the pandemic. When I first started interviewing people, and I would record maybe a couple of shows in 1 week, and I was worried. I was like, well, maybe in 2 months there won't be a pandemic, so I don't know if this is going to sound weird or not. But this is the new thing. I'm wondering, how have you been spending your pandemic? How has it affected your live experience? Like I've said a few times, I think the biggest critique that everybody has about it is that when you're playing live and you're meeting these people, you're networking and you're learning about new DJs you never heard of, or new opportunities, or just meeting old friends, but that sort of is not the same now. It's just different. You could do it online digitally, but you get what I'm saying. I'm wondering how that's affected you, if it has at all.
Yeah. So, I mean, I didn't get this, so I regret this, but I didn't get to as many live shows as I should have, right? But I did go out to shows, went to Lost Lands and a bunch of Ill Gates, Mr. Bill shows, which were really cool. Anytime a big bass music act would be in New York City or nearby, like maybe Philly or something like that, I might get in the car and check that out, but not as much as I should have. There were times where I'm like, should I go? I'm like, nah, I'll just stay in and write a song, write some music. I was leaning more towards, I was, just banging out as much music as I could. My goal in 2020, before the pandemic hit, was to start doing more live shows. And I had done, live shows in the past, but not as many as as I wanted to do. So that was a big goal for me in 2020. I had this awesome show lined up in March, just basically like days after like everything closed down. And that was going to be the beginning of like, my live show streak, and it all just stopped. So I decided to just pivot and, just do like the online streaming, do festivals, the online festivals. And that was fine. And it just allowed me to really triple down on my daily music production, right? I could, it was just a healthy escape for me. Instead of worrying about, the whole world collapsing around me, put my brain to more positive things and get lost in the music, right? I think that was a better use of my energy and brain power. And it was a real savior for me as well, because I mean, you know how anxious and and problematic your brain can be. It can take you to dark places. So just getting lost in making a new song is great, because like you're in the moment. You're not thinking about the future. You're not thinking about the past. You're just thinking about this song that I'm making, right? So it really, I just tripled down on my music production.
Yeah, it's weird that with the pandemic, when you talk about you thinking about your future or your past, it's like the whole I don't want to get too meta on it, but just the whole concept of a linear timeline just disappears, and every day is almost exactly the same. It's like Animal Crossing, Ableton, like eat totally unhealthy, go to sleep, right? So it's funny to, but it's good in a way. I feel like we've all sort of refactored the way how the world's going to be. Right now, it seems really shitty, but I think in 5 years, like Zoom is a thing now. How many places had like a no remote work policy, but now everyone's like, oh yeah, this is way better. People are more productive, and I get to stay home with my pets or whatever, right? So totally. in a way, I feel like we've sort of we're getting through it as a society. Some are more affected than others, obviously, but I think there's a lot of things that musicians and artists have learned from the pandemic. I'm not sure if that's true or not, but
yeah, absolutely. It shows you, how vital it is to not just have one revenue stream, right? So like the people that were hurting were the ones that just had like a revenue stream of live shows, right? And then the live shows ended, and they're like, and then they were in a really problematic situation. But like the artists that were diversified, who like, they did live shows, and they might have made good money from live shows, but they also had side hustles, right? So they did, one-on-one coaching, they did sync deals, they did, maybe paid remixing.
What's a sync deal?
So sync deal is when a company pays for your music so that they can put it in their commercial. Like they could put it in like a YouTube commercial, or like or they could use it in a TV show or a movie or something like that, and then you'll get money on the sync deal.
How do you get a sync deal? Do you know this secret or?
So there's there's actually a ton of companies online that like focus on sync deals. I don't really use any of them, but that is one way. Like you can join these companies that will help you with placement for different sync deals and stuff like that. But I mean, some of them, it's like, they have a fee, like you have to pay a fee to submit to certain opportunities. And I don't know, like a lot of those end up with nothing. So you're just out of money and stuff like that. But by, again, like the larger your community and the more plugged in you are to a lot of different places, you start to meet people in the industry. And, I mean, I met people in the industry who were in roles where like, they're like the executive producer for a TV channel or something like that. And they're constantly looking for music. Right. So they would just hit me up and be like, oh, can you help me with this? Like I have I need a song that sounds like this in the vein of this for this commercial. And then I would just give it to them, get a sync deal for that. I got a Spotify sync deal. So basically, you know how like Spotify has a free version?
Yeah.
So on the free version, I've never had it, but apparently they play commercials.
Oh yeah, they're real loud. They're real loud.
Do that?
You'll be listening to Brian Eno, and then it's like Diet Coke, and you're just like, ah.
So I got a Spotify sync deal where like they liked one of my songs, and they used one of my songs in their commercials. That would happen, and that paid really well. So there's if you get aligned with people whose job it is to do placement for like cable TV or commercials or films and stuff like that, they're constantly looking for music for their content. And the thing is, like, they don't want to. That music can be expensive. For example, if they were to play that like Jay-Z songs or like Taylor Swift, they wouldn't be able to afford it, right? Mm-hmm. So usually they look for artists that will do a song that kind of sounds like Jay-Z or kind of sounds like Taylor Swift or Katy Perry, but it's not them, and then they can pay a cheaper price for it, right?
Yeah, it's like on the radio here in Montreal. They won't play the Rolling Stones version of Painted Black. They'll play someone I've never heard of in my life covering it, because I guess it's cheaper to play that than to actually play the
too expensive. Yeah. I think what the pandemic has shown us is that, like, diversification and multiple revenue streams is very important for artists, because you never know when a pandemic is going to happen and take one of your revenue streams away.
Yeah, flexibility is the antidote to chaos, as they say.
Right.
Let's jump to some production stuff, if you don't mind. I'm curious. You have a lot of vocalists on some of your tracks. I'm curious how you go about finding a vocalist, even outside of the pandemic, but even in the pandemic. How do you find a vocalist, and how do you work with a vocalist to put with your music? Do you hire them? Do you write the lyrics for them? Do you send them a microphone and say, hey, can you use this microphone? Can you walk us through your process for that?
Yeah, so there's multiple things that I have done, right? So one thing is you can hire a vocalist, right? And there's so for example, there's this website called Studio Pros, studiopros.com. They're based in Los Angeles, and they have a lot of talented singers, like crazy off the charts talented singers. So both male and female, right? And you can hire them to do top line. You could hire them to just sing. And there's different price points based on what service you provide. Top line is going to be more expensive than if you wrote the lyrics and say, hey, here are my lyrics, can you sing these to this song that I made? That'll be a cheaper price. But so that's one way you can commission them. Another way is what I mentioned before, through communities. So like in all the communities that I'm in, there's tons of vocalists and rappers and artists of all talents. And through relationships, like, oh, I'm a friend, I befriend a singer, and they like your music, like, oh, I really dig your stuff. You're like, oh, would you be interested in collabing sometime? And then it just becomes like an organic thing, and then there's no payment for it, because like you basically just both split it down the middle 50-50. So that's another way. And then yet another way is just grab vocals off Splice or sounds.com. And then when I do that, I get like really creative with it, whereas like I'll kind of bend it beyond the the pale of recognition, right? Like just like morph it and make it, put my own fingerprint on it. Like take a vocal line and make my own fingerprint of it. So it's not just like the raw vocal snatched off of Splice or something like that. Like do something unique with it to kind of put my own fingerprint on it, and create narratives through different samples.
What is the sound design process when you're, I guess, mangling up some of the vocals, or even when you're just processing normal vocals?
So, there's a lot of things you could do. So you could just put them through like granular synthesis. So like in Ableton, there's the granulator. I think it's granulator 2 now or something like that. So you could put it in a granulator and then mess with the sample start time, and just like, it sounds all choppy. And then you just put tons of different effects at the end of the chain, and make it sound weird and all sorts of stuff. And one of the methods that I like to do is Ill Gates calls it mud pie, right? But Mr. Bill also calls it mud pie as well. It's basically you take a sound, whether it's a vocal or a bass line or any instrument, and you basically run it through tons of bizarre effects while you're resampling it, right? So you just hit record and you let it record for like 5-10 minutes. And as it's recording, you just pile on all the different weird effects, delays, distortions, granulators, reverbs, just randomly pick stuff, twist knobs, try to break it, twist it, contort it. And then at the end of the 10 minutes, you now have like a 10-minute bizarre soup of a mud pie, basically. Yeah. And then what you do is you then go through that and pick out the golden moments, because you're never going to use 10 minutes of that. It's usually, sometimes you could do a 10-minute mud pie session and you only use 1 second or 2 seconds. And it's usually like the 2 coolest seconds of the whole experimentation. And then just piecing the gold nuggets all together into a great take, if that makes sense.
Oh, totally. I remember that's sort of my process. I guess my background is more like I was doing a lot of breakcore in the early 2000s and like IDM and stuff. And that was the key. I would have these 20-minute jam sessions where I'm just making as much noise as possible. Sounds like Merzbow or something. And then you'd find like a 2-second clip that sounds really cool. And then you could use that as in your song. I noticed, because on your, not to keep bringing this up, but your Dopamine EP, there was a song Get It that was kind of like a hip hop sort of vibe, but also it sounded like Prefuse 73, kind of like Warp Records, like IDM kind of vibe to it. And I think some of the techniques that you're talking about, you might have used in that more so in Skivvies, which was like an IDM super glitch hop, like neurofunk kind of thing going on. And when you're doing the neurofunk sounds, I think you have to use a lot of granulator. Am I correct? Or
right? Yeah, I use tons of granulators in that, and stretching, and also the warp modes in Ableton are amazing. I'm constantly experimenting with warp mode. So what I'll do is I'll take a sound and I'll warp it and bring it up to 999. So what that does is it just stretches the sound so it's like ridiculously long, and then it sounds totally different. And then you could put it in texture mode and mess with transposition. And then when you do transposition and texture mode on a stretched out piece of audio, it gets all kinds of bonkers.
That's awesome. Let's talk about what do you got? Like, what do you have for hardware? What are you using for DAW? I guess we figured out it's Ableton. What are your plugins? What's your process look like?
Yeah, so I'm currently on Ableton Live 11, and I've been using Ableton since 2014. And I have a Sub 37, so Moog Sub 37. I have a Make Noise O-Coast. I also have Machine Studio. I have a Push, MIDI fighter, and a ton of guitar pedals from my rock and roll days. So I'll, a lot of times I'll put the Sub 37 or the No Coast through my guitar pedals, and like distortion and delays and tremolos and envelope filters and a Jimi Hendrix fuzz box thing, and then again, like do mud pies or that kind of stuff.
Yeah, like a digital delay pedal will go a long way. I think a lot of
Oh
people
yeah, I got
like the Ibanez
digital
ones, like the Ibanez digital delays are amazing.
Yeah, that's the one I got.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
So yeah, I mean, that's basically my equipment, and I just make do with that, you know?
Do you find, well, I guess maybe it's because of the rock background. Sometimes I'll interview people and I'm thinking they come from studios of just tons of gear, and I find out it's like a cracked version of Ableton, and I'm like, what the hell is going on? You know, this sounds like amazing. Do you find that, are you against hardware, or I guess maybe I can answer this for you. Maybe you just feel more familiar with what you have, and it's not it sounds better than what's in the box. It's better for you to use the Moog and the pedals than it is to use maybe a VST that's an equivalent. Is that correct? Or
so to be honest, even though I have this hardware, to be honest, like these days, I'm not even using the hardware. So like, you know, I might use the hardware for a sound design session where I'll create a bunch of mud pies, but then I'll take the mud pies and create like a song out of the mud pies. Like, you know, a lot of times I'll just create something from scratch in Ableton using like operator, you know, just sound design something using sine waves or noise, and then just mess with that. It's just easier and quicker than having to deal with hooking up the equipment and stuff like that.
Yeah. First of all, I want to thank you again for your time. We're getting towards the end of the interview. I don't want to take the entire night for you. Totally appreciate it. This has been great. I want to ask a couple more questions before we sign off here a little bit. I want to talk about mentors. You brought up Ill Gates a few times. I think you mentioned it when I was researching your background a little bit. Charles Dye, he's a Grammy Award-winning producer, I think, musician. I'm curious, how important is it? You talked about having communities and being part of communities, but what about like the roles of mentorships? You're saying you give classes. Do you think that's really a shortcut for where a person wants to be? I think it is. I think a lot of people should have mentors, but a lot of people can't find mentors. How do you feel about having mentors for music?
Oh God, like so. Mentors are the way to level up like exponentially.
Not the
fast.
mentors.
Wait, say again?
I said not the Mentors, the horrible horror rock band. I mean mentors.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. That's what I mean. But mentors are the way to level up exponentially. So for example, like I was chasing my tail when I tried to just do it myself. Like, you know, struggling with like YouTube tutorials and stuff like that. But then the second, like I connected with Ill Gates, and he was my mentor for 2 years. I had one-on-one sessions with him for 2 years, and like it just like I leveled up exponentially. I also did one-on-ones with Mr. Bill for a year, because you know, through Dylan, like so Dylan Ill Gates collaborates with Mr. Bill, and that's how I was introduced to Mr. Bill, and I started doing one-on-ones with Bill, and that was just mind-blowing. And when you have when you can work with a mentor, they can basically save all that time. If you were just by yourself trying to figure stuff out, they save all that time by just filling in all the blanks and just letting you know like the real nitty-gritty of what you need to know and what you don't need to know.
Yeah.
And leveling up quickly. And you know, and that's what we do at Producer Dojo. So I'm a sensei. That's what we're called. So a mentor at Producer Dojo, and we have one-on-ones with our community members each month. And you know, we help them level up, and it's the most satisfying thing in the world to me when I'm working with a student and I see the light bulb go off, like when I teach them a concept that they weren't aware of, and the light bulb goes off, and you see how stoked they are because they're like, oh my God, like I never knew that before. And
yeah.
And then you start hearing the music like get better, like in leaps and bounds. Like you start with them in the beginning of the year and their music might be you know, one way, like early in their production journey. But then after meeting with you and getting direction on where they need to focus, and which skills they need to upgrade and focus on. And then you start hearing their music come back, and it's like dope, and it's like, oh my God, like, without a mentor, it would take you like a much longer time to achieve that.
How do you find mentors? Like, do you just type it in Google, like music production mentors, or do you even recommend maybe reading biographies on like musicians or?
So great question. And here, the interesting thing is, like, now that we're in the pandemic, like everybody's open to mentoring. So before pandemic, it wasn't as available widespread everywhere, because like all the would-be mentors were out doing live shows, right? And they didn't have time to do mentoring. But now, like in the pandemic, there are no live shows. So like, and they've lost income. So probably like your favorite musicians would be stoked to do a one-on-one with you, and you could just hit them up. Like if you have like a dozen artists, like say that like you're totally respect right now, and like you love their music and stuff like that, just go to their socials, and sure enough, I'm sure they'll have a Patreon, right? And a lot of times in the Patreon, they give one-on-ones. They'll do one-on-ones. But even I notice a lot of the artists that I listen to, I'll just hit up their Facebook page, and I'll see, they'll even have something like, I'm available for one-on-one sessions, and just, you could just hit them up, like just reach out to them. These days in the pandemic, they'd be stoked to do a one-on-one session, considering that, like, their main incomes of live shows has gone.
That's amazing. You imagine if you could, like, I'm just thinking of all my favorite artists, like who I wish growing up I would have had that opportunity to be able to learn from, and now that's a reality because of everything,
Right. Yeah. Same. So that's the beautiful thing about the entertainment industry today, because like back when I was younger, listening to Pink Floyd, like you're never going to meet Pink Floyd. You're never going to interact with David Gilmour. Like you ever, like there's literally a wall between the audience and the artist, right? These days, there is no wall between for an artist to function in 2021, there is no wall between artist and fan. Like the artist is directly interacting with their fans on social media, and they have relationships with them. They're friends with them. They, you can hit them up on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook, and have conversations with them, and join their Patreon and support them, and do one-on-ones with them. It's amazing. It's absolutely, it's an amazing time.
Yeah. Sean, thank you so much for letting me speak with you. It's been a blast. It's lots of really good information. I think this is one of the better ones. No offense, guys. Where can you throw out your socials and where we could find out more about you, and maybe drop some links for Producer Dojo? Maybe that would be helpful too.
Absolutely. Yeah. So the good news is, my artist name, if you just type it into Google, like I'm like the only Spiderhound. So like Spiderhound comes up. So spiderhound.com will lead you to all my socials, and I'm Spiderhound on all the socials, Twitter, Instagram, Spotify, everything. Right. Producerdojo.com is Il Gates's production community. And we basically have we have Dojo TV, where you can watch our community members deliver educational content. Dylan Il Gates does the weekly download every week. It's free to join and watch. You can join the membership. So there's different levels of membership. But I mean, just to explore more, you can go to producerdojo.com and see how you can get involved. So usually people just, join the Discord, and kind of, hang out in the Discord and get a better sense of the community, and then, decide whether they want to, level up in membership and stuff like that, where if you level up in membership, you can get access to one-on-one training. So, you can get one-on-one sessions every month with different senseis within our community. And it's a great way to level up your production skills. And we have an amazing community, Producer Dojo. So, a lot of the questions that you asked tonight were like, how do I find this? How do I find that? And I would say, Producer Dojo is a great place to start. We're a huge community of music producers, very knowledgeable and very friendly, and we help each other. Like we help each other rise and level up by sharing information. There's no competition among us. We're there to help each other rise.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sean, for your time. I totally appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for inviting me. This was awesome.
Yeah, no problem. Take care.
Okay.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.